I was a fat kid growing up, and it's something that's like, we're talking about wounds that you have. Like, I always go back to being a fat kid. It's like, then you never lose that. There's always that kind of feeling of like fat kid, like, oh no, but they wouldn't like me anyway. There's that thing that never leaves you, which I'm sure everyone has in their own way. My mum, what still is, she writes children's television.
Really?
So she's head writer on Fireman Sam.
Wow. No way.
Massive claim to fame.
Oh my day.
It was like fucking on motorbikes. It was like vampires. It was like sweat. It was that feeling of kind of like primal was another one of them. So it was then we sort of sat down and took that time to kind of define the parameters of what our world was going to look like. And then we started writing things that fitted in the world. So the lyrics are about like, you'll never forget where you got the scars, because they're attached to memories.
Wow.
So you wear those memories on your skin, which I think is a beautiful thought.
What is your earliest memory involving music?
Wow. Okay. My earliest memory involving music, probably, and this sounds too cool to be true, but my dad took me to see Bootsy Collins as my first ever gig that I ever went to. And I remember being like, this is the most incredible thing in the world. And that was like the first live music. But my first music was my dad used to make me CDs, like burnt CDs, of like compilations of like the best Beatles songs that he's ever heard. And then he used to like give them to me so I could get like a 101 on the best songs of all time.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a journey what a place to start.
Yeah.
So was it just Beatles CDs, or did that expand into other genres?
Yeah, it was basically, it was like he'd do like a compilation of like his favourite Beatles songs, then with like a Stone song, and then like a Randy Newman. My dad's a massive like songwriter fan.
Yeah.
So he loves like Paul Simon, Randy Newman, and all those kind of people, like Kate Bush, people that like tell stories with their lyrics.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that was probably like the first introduction to what writing a song that could tell a story was. And then I'd listen to those, and then he'd make me a new one, and then put that on. And
then, so that was your first introduction to songwriting. When did you first pick up your pen?
I played guitar. My first instrument I ever played was the drums, because I thought it was cool, and it was cool. And I was always very rhythmic. And then I realised I wanted to start telling, like there was things that I wanted to say and stories that I wanted to tell. And I kind of realised fairly early on that like through song was a kind of more accessible way to tell, to say messages, or to tell a story, than it was just writing. So I think I was like 11 when I first started writing with like my guitar. I'd learned how to play guitar, and then I started writing about 11 with my guitar teacher.
And what did those first songs look like?
They were cool, but they were always quite deep. But they were kind of like very lyric-y. They were very lyric-y, and they were about like storytelling. One called like Johnny Said, and really referenced Randy Newman as an absolutely massive influence.
Right.
I love Randy Newman because I just think his like storytelling and the world that he suddenly creates, and he just dips you into this like world that you had no idea existed, and then you sort of exit and you're like, wow. And those songs were very much that, very like narrative, like meandering lyrics. That was what they sounded like.
Wow. And what does childhood look like for you growing up? What was that experience like?
My childhood, well, my dad was a television presenter, and he was a very into music. So as far as music goes, it was just always in the house. And it was like, he has this, like, we have a music room in the back room with like a drum kit and like a percussion wall. And then there's a whole wall of CDs where like you could just go and like look at them and pick them out. And so my life was him sort of showing me music through that kind of thing. And then my mum, what still is, she writes children's television.
Really?
So she's head writer on Fireman Sam.
Wow. No way.
Massive claim to fame.
Oh my day. So many hours.
Really?
Sat in front of the television watching that growing up. I'm sure I had the fire engine as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. She's amazing. So I had so because of them both, because of my dad being a television presenter, he was also musical as well. And my mom was like this children's television writer. It was always a very creative household. It was never like weird. I was saying this to them last night. It was never weird that I wanted to be a musician, or that's what I was going to do. It wasn't like, no, Rosie, you should probably think about getting a normal job. It was like, it was it was a mixture of nature and nurture, as far as like it was very acceptable that this is what I was going to do.
That's such a great unit to have, the fact that like you say, they wouldn't tell you, oh, you have to get a real job.
Yeah.
That's something I think most creatives struggle with, but you having that freedom
Definitely.
to, that must have been so useful growing up.
It was amazing. I mean, it's like it also adds to the fact that you do think it's going to go well, whatever that you're very confident that it's going to work out, which obviously sometimes when you've got no money and you're like, is this going to work out? You're like, and no skills at all. You haven't spent any time acquiring any skills except for doing music. There's moments where you're like, why didn't I get the backup job?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was always incredibly supportive, amazing upbringing full of just like laughter and music and songwriting and jamming. And it's always been what I was going to do.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I feel like, for me at least, growing up, you kind of have your formative years in, your childhood where your music taste is kind of shaped by those around you. But as you move into, your adolescence, your teen years, for me, that's when it started to change and I started to discover my own music taste.
Yeah.
Did that happen for you?
100%. But it's embarrassing.
Oh, go on.
It got less cool. It got less cool. Like, my dad set me up with these amazing, heritage, incredible songwriters. Then I got into pop punk, didn't I? Like a
Pop punk is not uncool. No, I resent that.
Okay, no, I love pop punk. Yeah, well, I loved pop punk. But I was like massive Blink-182 ska, like Real Big Fish, like all of that kind of stuff. Like, absolutely loved it. And that was my teenage years, just wearing fat pants and going to like Real Big Fish concerts and Les and Jake and moshing, which was amazing.
Yeah.
But once again, like good storytelling, like in lots of those songs. So I loved it. Sum 41, classic.
Yeah, of course. On their last tour now as well. Yeah.
Well, he's not very well, is he?
I mean, everybody has their time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, but that was my development. That's where I got more into what I was into, was that. And I think that's probably where the kind of rock thread came in.
Sure.
So I think my dad wasn't like a massive rock head, but I think the things that I was drawn to were slightly heavier.
Okay.
Which is the more like punky stuff but I wasn't into like Sex Pistols. I was always still into songs, which is where that kind of like Sum 41 and those, like, they were still songy.
Yeah.
Didn't like just shouting. Like, I'm not into like heavy rock.
Yeah.
Because it's like you lose that song for me. So yeah, that's it.
Okay. And then how do we get to Bones UK? Because that brings us here, obviously.
Yeah.
But how do we get to Bones UK? Where does that begin?
So me and Carmen, I met Carmen. I've been in just like, as you do when you're a young musician, just like in and out of like various different setups of bands, just like continually trying to make it work, didn't work, or just kept sort of like fluffing about trying to do it. And then me and Carmen, I'd been in something that had just broken up. I met Carmen in Camden in the Blues Kitchen.
Okay.
She was jamming.
Great pub, by the way.
A great pub.
Yeah.
She was jamming with, like, as she always did. She'd go and just like jam with like the sort of the blues heads, which were just always old men, and Carmen sitting on a stool. And everyone was like, wow, she's amazing. So I spoke to her afterwards and was like, do you want to do something? Because I was kind of in between. I didn't know what I was going to do. Spoke to her afterwards, said we should make some music together. We sort of had a big, massive night out. Spoke about what we were going to do, and then we just started writing. And we wrote 4 songs with our producer Filippo.
What were the 4 songs?
There was a song called Electric, which went, good God, that boy is electric. There was another one called Crave, which I don't think's out, which was classic. Which was like a bit like Bob Dylan. It was really cool. And then, I don't remember the other 2 were, but those are 2 of them.
Wow.
They were really cool.
Okay.
And it was kind of what we did, what we knew we wanted to do. I've been in lots of like rock bands, but what I knew I wanted to do with this project, which is why we got Filippo involved, who's the producer, he's like electronic led. Like his production sensibilities and his drums is much more electronic.
Right.
And even like his beats and his rhythms, they're not like rock rhythms. And it was something that from the offset was really important for us to do, is to not just sound like a rock band.
Right.
Because I don't know, for me, I want to do something that people haven't heard before. That's kind of important as well.
Sure.
And so I really wanted to we had this conversation about marrying, the kind of rock and roll sensibilities and look, i.e. me and Carmen look like a rock band, but underneath is this kind of electronic beats and the kind of big subs and the big bass, and never deviating from that being the kind of sonic world that Bones sits in.
I feel like Bones is probably one of the most unique bands on the scene right now, which I love about you guys. I think is fantastic. I do want to know though, were there any bands that you looked at in creating, you know, this sound, and you thought that's what I want to sound like, or that's what I want to sound similar to?
Like, not really.
Really?
Like, not the. We knew there's references as far as like the rock side of it. There was like obvious references, which was like Queens of the Stone Age, or there was like kind of the hookiness of certain things, the big rock bands that we wanted to emulate on the rock side of things. But we didn't. The reference that people always say we sound like is Rage Against the Machine.
Okay.
Right, and that's sort of like the one that always comes up because of that electronic kind of like industrial rock and roll stuff. But it wasn't a reference that we had in our minds. It was when we sat down to do the band. We knew that Filippo was more in that electronic world, and we knew that our sensibilities were more in the kind of rock world. Mm-hmm. And it was just sort of like putting those two things together and seeing what happened, and Bones came out of it. The only thing that we did do is we sat down on the first day and were like, let's pick like 10 words. Okay. That is how we want people to feel when they listen to Bones.
What were those 10 words?
It was like snakes. It was like, am I allowed to say sex? It was like,
yeah, that's cool.
It was like fucking on motorbikes. It was like vampires. Right. It was like sweat. It was what else? Yeah, it was snakes. It was leather. It was like that feeling of kind of like primal mm-hmm. was another one of them. So it was then we sort of sat down and took that time to kind of define the parameters of what our world was going to look like, and then we started writing things that fitted in the world. And that's a songwriting. That's how Bones writes as well, as we set the parameters of the world, and then once you set the parameters of the world, it kind of happens quite naturally.
Okay, wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's great
because it's like. With creativity, it's like there's so many directions you can go, mm-hmm. right? Like nothing's wrong. It's all subjective. It's like maybe you could go to an A chord there, or maybe it could be a B. You know, it's like, or maybe that drum beat. There's so many different options that for me and for us as artists, if we don't set those parameters mm-hmm. of the world, it's just like it's so endless. So, and then that feeds into the visuals and everything. It's like this is what we want it to feel like and sound like, and then it will just work.
Visually, what's been your favourite project?
As far as Bones?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Like, our first one, Beautiful is Boring video for me is still my favourite video that we've ever done. Because mm-hmm. it was like an idea that I had, which was... Because it was another thing we wanted to play with. There wasn't... When we first started doing Bones, which was like 10 years ago now, maybe... there wasn't that many rock and roll girl bands out there. Like I'm not saying we were like the first, but there wasn't that many.
Yeah.
So I really loved the idea of playing with gender within what it means to be a rock star. And I had this idea of like, I was looking at Beatles Mania and all those like screaming girls fainting and what a fan is. And it's usually a female who's like freaking out at a boy band and throwing her underpants. And I just thought like, just what a brilliant gender flip to just flip the gender on that. Yeah. And have the girl to the rock band. And what does it look like to have men being like, you know, fainting and screaming and like losing,
you're right,
throwing their undies and like, you know, like, oh. I just, it was like the most amazing idea. I find that gender flip sometimes can be the most. It makes such a lovely little point, but just very simple.
Oh, that's so great! Oh man,
it was a cool video.
No, for sure. I want to talk about Cheap Love because that was where I discovered you guys. You know, thanks to Dave who sent me the track. What were the 10 words for Cheap Love?
There was 10 words. Can I do like 3?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, it was like emotive was one of them. English was another one, and like gritty was another one because Cheap Love was such a combination of like, we'd just come back to England and we kind of wanted to honour our English roots a bit. That's why the music videos are in England, and it was one of those songs that came out very naturally in that way. And I don't know, it's quite different for us, that song, but it was one that just like came out. It was very instinctive.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And you said you just said that, you know, coming back to England, you split your time between the UK and the US?
I didn't. So we moved. So after we formed Bones, we we did this record with Jeff Beck, who's like the guitar player, who's no longer with us. And then through doing that, we moved to LA because we sort of were like, right, we wanted to try. We'd just been doing the London circuit for so long that it was like the thought of doing like the Old Blue Last and like, just like doing that, like I'm back again with a new band. I can't. So we moved to LA, and then we were just there for like 6 years. And then recently I've started to come back and forth a bit more.
Okay. And I it's kind of spot on what you say there about the London circuit, because as great as the city is for new music, it can become really hard for new bands to cut through playing the same venues, with not like, I kind of got to put the London scene on blast a little bit. It can be kind of a frustrating place to try and break through, don't you think?
Absolutely. And it was just, I don't think there is it's hard. You're just doing the same circuit over and over again, which is fine, but it's,
it's like the venues don't care to some degree.
Exactly. It kind of felt like that a bit. So it just needed a change. It's like I just couldn't do that again. It's like the fifth incarnation of me doing a band. I was like, come on, me again. So, but being away from London for so long, we're doing a couple of like little shows.
Yeah.
And that's like, I'm not like the novelty's back now. I'm like, it's like the old days. It's like come back to the Roundhouse. It's like cool.
So are you looking forward to doing those shows here just because it's been so long and,
Yeah, 100%. We're really excited about it because it's because the same token, when we first moved to America, touring America was like the most exciting thing ever. You were like going through like Vegas and Route 66, and you'd be doing the thing. You're like, wow, this is so cool. We've done it 5 times now, so now we're like, oh God, just get bored of it.
Wow,
you're like Vegas schmegas, but yeah. So yeah, it's like it's just anything, you kind of get used to it, and then it's like, so yeah, we're really excited to be back in London and doing some shows.
That's so dope.
Yeah. When we played the Roundhouse, we were like, I want like a grimy after party. So we did it at the Good Mixer. I was like, it's like, where can we have the after party that's like English and like it was a mess. We were saying it was like it was debauched. It was like plates of like, it was like trays of Jaeger bombs.
Because I feel like growing up in like Camden or frequenting the area growing up, to me, for those that don't know, we are actually recording this in the Roundhouse. This has always been like the jewel in the crown. It's a bit too nice for Camden. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was it like playing here for you?
Amazing. It was like this playing Roundhouse and playing Coco with the two like one day I'm gonna play, and when you do it you're like what, because the other venues have been such shitholes that when you get here you're like, oh my, a dressing room, because like have you been backstage at Coco?
Yes.
Like those like weird like the little stairs, I think it's all been redone, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But even that, like, it's a bit of a shithole in Coco when you play it, like, it's great, but like this was like wow.
Yeah.
It was, and we played the room underneath it first. It's a big moment playing Coco.
Wow.
And Roundhouse.
That's so fire. Yeah. Whilst we're here, we got to talk about the new album.
Yeah.
It's coming up.
Yeah.
So what was the whole concept? Let's start from the beginning. When did you decide, okay, we want to do a record?
Yeah.
What do we want to do? How do we want to do it?
So I mean, this record that started sort of like it started going before COVID. So it was like we put out the first record, and then we're like, right, let's get this done, let's get this straight done, get it out the gates. COVID, and then by which point like a year and a half has passed, and you're looking at your demos, you're like, okay, back to the album, and you look at your demos, you're like, oh, no, this one's not really resonating with me anymore.
So did you decide to hold it back in spite of what was going on in the world?
Yeah, we were working on it, but it's just, just like the drive to do, at that point you just didn't even feel like, you were like, well, I don't even know whether we're ever going to play shows again. It was a bit like, as much as we all were like during COVID, I shall learn a new language, or like, it was hard to have that motivation at all times to kind of push forward with creativity. So there was, to a certain extent, we kind of like the foot was off the gas a bit. And then we went to Italy. We all sort of reconvened in Italy. We rented this. Hat. This is like classic after COVID move, because we're like, life's short, man, like who cares how much it costs. Just so good to be playing music.
So
we rented this chateau, this like Italian villa which we then recorded a load of songs in. Like, didn't use any of them. But it was like it's a complete waste of money and time. We're all a bit frazzled from COVID, everyone was a bit weird. So just wasted a load of money on that. And then we sort of all had a breath and then all came back together in Nashville. And that's where we did Cheap Love and Milk. Both came out of that session. We'd been in London, then we went there and recorded them in Nashville.
Okay.
And then we sat down and finished the record. And so the songs on the record are like this kind of amazing... they've got a timeline to them. Like they weren't all written in like a week in like a studio. They're really like a journey, and it was really about like there was lots of different batches. We went to this amazing studio called Sonic Ranch in Texas, which is just the best place ever. And so they're all like the best from each one of those batches.
Yeah.
So it was like one from the Italian house, like a couple from London. So we really curated like the strongest things here, which I think has meant that the body of work is kind of very strong in a way that sometimes happens with the first record, because you have all that time before. You've got the whole, to write it. And then so.
Wow. So even though it's a second record, it's almost like a first record in the way that you've built it.
Definitely.
Okay. And like why was it presented in the fashion that it's presented? The songs that we have. Do you want to talk about it? Maybe we go through it track by track, and so let's start with Bikinis. Why do you open with this?
It's like a mission statement. Bikinis for me, it's like a palate cleanser. So the reason why, one of the main things about Bones that we always go back to is like, would the song be being played in a vampire nightclub? Like it's like a nightclub for vampires, and if they drop this song, will the vampires be like, yeah? And it's like, yes.
Okay.
For Bikinis, it's got that like slutty little beat, and it's like trance-like.
Yeah.
And it kind of like cleanses the palate, and it sets the tone of the world that we're going to be like taking you into. I wouldn't want to start the record with like one of the big pop songs. I prefer to kind of set the tone, cleanse the palate, get people ready for what's to come.
Okay. And then we move into Me.
Yeah. Pop song.
Yeah. I don't want to say, but yeah.
So you've cleansed the palate, and like everyone's like, yeah, fucking yeah, cool. So Me's Me's one of my favorite songs on the record. It's very poppy.
Okay.
But for me, Me is the message of it is something that was really important to me for the next record for us, because I wanted to add to what we've been saying, right? There's a lot of things that we stand behind as a band is like we want to have good messages. We want to empowerment's a really strong one for us, and making people feel kind of comfortable with who they are, no matter what they are, no matter what gender they are, et cetera, et cetera. We're like the voice of kind of the underdog. That's what we like. And the song Me is kind of the anthem for that.
Okay.
So I think it's a good second song. If it was the first song, people would be like, oh, God. It's like poppy, and it's like, like, oh. So you got to be cool, and then you can slip in the pop song.
And then Dopamine, to me, is the enigma of the album. It really stands out,
In a good way?
Yeah. I mean, it's like the whole record is a great listen, but it just really stands out.
Yeah.
So I'd really love to know, why it goes in that direction. Yeah.
So I knew that I wanted to write a song about dopamine, because it's obviously just like, I don't know, it just is like, it's what we all, it just made total sense to me to write a song called Dopamine. I'm sure it's been done before, but that's what I wanted to do. And then we sat down, as we always do, which is usually how we write, is I sort of have an idea about something I want to say. And then same thing as when we create the band, you build the parameters sonically about like how should that song sound.
Right.
So when it was a song about dopamine, we thought like it has to be like, you have to feel like you're being kind of taken on this trip. Like it's like the drug of, you're being kind of, you're high on dopamine.
Yeah.
So the song for us had to be this kind of meandering journey where it's kind of like hypnotic, and it gets really intense at the end in a way that's kind of cracky. Like, you need like fucking more of this shit. It's got that feeling to it. It's a bit kind of tense and trance-like you're kind of having an ayahuasca trip on dopamine. That was the That's where we got to, and our producer's like the Don. You know, he's like this Italian guy who like will like take acid and sit. And I don't know. I say acid.
It's fine. Don't worry. Yeah.
Will like take the acid and like sit in the production room and just like close his eyes. You know, like he'll like go on the journey with it.
Yeah.
So when he presented it to us, it was like,
oh man, wow.
Okie dokes.
Won't Settle.
Yeah.
Now, first single from the new record. Kind of like an impact statement, I'd say, you know. Again, you know, I'm just intrigued to hear. I kind of want you to just take me on this
the journey.
Yeah.
Okay, so Won't Settle, the technicalities of where it was written. We wrote it, that was London. We have we're friends with the Raw Blood lot, Mike from Raw Blood, very good friend, and Ben. But they introduced us to Schumann from Queens of the Stone Age. And then I went to Magic Castle, mental night. We went to Magic Castle in LA. There's this place called the Magic Castle, which is like a magician's house in LA. And me and Mike and Schumann, it's all right. Me and Mike and Schumann ended up in the Magic Castle at this like insane night.
What does this place look like, the Magic Castle?
So imagine like a magician's house. It's like an old mansion, like a haunted mansion in central LA. And the idea is that it's like you go there. It's like the inner circle, the magicians. You have to be invited. You have to wear like a suit and tie, otherwise you're not allowed in.
Okay.
And me and Mike and Schumann had this mental night. Me and Schumann, like, you know, fell in love friendship wise and just became amazing friends after that. It was mental. So then we decided that we wanted to work with Schumann on a couple of songs. And we did it. We happened to be in London. So he came to my dad's back room with all of the records.
Yeah.
And we sat down, and the whole thing, which I really wanted to pay homage to in this record, which we kind of straddled the two worlds of like, people say that we're too rock for alternative and too alternative for rock. So
what does that even mean?
I don't know, but they say.
What does that mean? Too alternative for rock and too rock for alternative.
We're not heavy enough for the rockers, and we're not pop enough for the alternative.
Oh my God.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
Outrageous. So, but we wanted to, within this song and within this record, make sure that we had like a bit of like proper like classic like rock, like some real like rocky riffs in there, like classic, like and who better than to do that than Schumann. So we sat down with him, we wrote this song, and that's where the Karma came up with the riff, and that was like the proper classic riff, right? And then we came up with then the chorus. We're like, what are we gonna do with the chorus?
Yeah.
And then they do this chord change where it goes into like massive thing, and I sing the melody, and we're like, can we do that? It's so fucking poppy. It's like, is it too
Isn't
much?
that the bit like the most gratifying feeling though, when you create a song and you're asking yourself, can I do that?
Yes.
Doesn't that mean you've gone to like a new realm of creativity?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Because it was our question was like, can we marry those two worlds together?
Yeah.
Can we start in this place? It's got this like rocky riff, which is like that everyone's like, oh, I get this. Okay, I get this song. It's going to be like rock song. Get it? It's a riff. And then can we like go to somewhere really poppy for the chorus? And it's like, yeah, I think we fucking can. I think we can, guys. I think we're gonna do it. So we did it, and it was like, and I love it. I think it's amazing. It's something that it's another one which is nice because it's like an entrance point into the kind of different things that we touch on the record. Because it takes you to that kind of like a bit like Cheap Love is a bit more kind of polished. It's got that element in there, but then it also kind of like gives a kiss on the head to like our rock fans.
Yeah.
Because I don't ever want to alienate the people that love us for what we do in that world as well. So.
Well, do you not think then that like your fans will love you no matter what you do? Because it's so different.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'd like to think.
I think so.
I'd love to think so. I think I don't ever want. Yeah, and I think it's a dangerous game to play. It's like second guess what people are going to like, because I think you then start going like, you're not acting with your instincts anymore. So I think you've got to go with what your instincts are. And yeah, I hope that our fans will love us no matter what we do.
Absolutely, I will. I can say that.
Babes.
Oh, of course. Knee Deep.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, it's like 5 minutes and 17 seconds long.
sir.
Brilliant. I love it. You know something? I think there is still a charm to bands doing longer songs in a world where songs for radio, especially radio, are becoming like 1 minute 30 seconds, you know? So I think doing a longer piece of art like this is very, I just love it. I love it so much.
I agree.
You know?
I agree, and especially a song on a record, like it's not, especially it's knowing your beast, right? Also, it's like knowing it's not going to be a single, probably, so it's not going to be on the fucking radio. So it's like whatever.
Yeah.
Like let's make it. Let's let the song breathe, and what the song's about is about, you know, not wanting to be shallow. It's about kind of. It's one of my favorite songs I've ever written, like because it's the heart of it is this feeling which I feel so much. I reckon we all feel. It's this feeling of like I just wish that I didn't have to know so much. You know, so sometimes you kind of envy the innocent, right? It's like it's that thing where it's like feeling things so deeply and being so aware of all of the nuances of things that are going on in the world today. Some days you're just like, I wish I was a bit stupider. You know, wouldn't it be easier to just like float around in the shallows? You know, and obviously not. You know, obviously not really.
No, but
you
I know
some
the
days you
feeling.
just
Like,
want to break.
yeah, sometimes I look at my 5-year-old niece and I'm like, if only you knew.
Yes.
You know?
You just want to like splash about in the water and giggle without having to be like, oh God. So yeah, but that song being so long was testament to that's what that song needed. It needed to breathe, and Carmen needs to do a solo on it, and it needs to not be like.
Was there a specific moment, like, not necessarily politically, but just like, you know, was there a moment going on at the time where you wrote that and you were like, it was heavy and that's why you decided to go down that road? Or
I think it was like there were so many things. I mean, for me, it's not even like political with me. It's more just like I'm like a massive like sponge as far as like other people. If someone's feeling bad, I'm feeling bad. So it's just like that feeling of that kind of relentlessness of like just wanting a break from that was more for me. Yeah.
Wow.
So, but then of course all the shit going on in the world as well.
I mean, literally, you know.
Of course. But yeah, that was more for me, just like drained.
Let's talk about Perfectly Imperfect.
Yes.
You know, tell me about it. What like, was this a personal feeling? Was this, again, were you projecting onto something? Was it something projecting on you?
Yeah. It was, I mean, it's once again, it's our mission statement. You know, it's like with songs like Beautiful is Boring off the first record, there is such a resonance that I have. Like, I was a fat kid growing up, and it's something that's like, you know, we're talking about wounds that you have. Like, I always go back to being a fat kid. You know, it's like, you know, you never lose that. There's always that kind of feeling of like fat kid, like, oh no, well they wouldn't like me anyway. There's that thing that never leaves you, which I'm sure everyone has in their own way.
Like the lack of confidence. Basically. Yeah.
And no matter how confident you feel, you know, and I'm incredibly confident. But if, you know, you get a little bit of rejection, you're fat, you're little fat Oddie. I've got fat Oddie tattooed on my arse.
Really?
Yeah. Because it was like, although in the Knicks, people used to call me Fat Oddie in school. It's very sad. So I know my surname's Oddie. And and so, you know, we all have these like, you know, places that we go to, and it's something I've always been aware of, is kind of feeling lesser than, or you know, and I've tried to unpack it and work through it, and I have done a very successful job of that sometimes, but it never leaves you. And so for me, this body confidence thing and this kind of being happy with yourself no matter what you look like or who you are is such an important one, because it's like for kids and stuff, like you can never rely on the external to, you know, fix the internal. You've got to find a way to be okay on your insides. And for kids, when they come up to us afterwards and say like, that's what it is about. So Perfectly Imperfect is like the anthem for that.
Wow.
And I thought it was such a good, I think someone else did.
Does that happen a lot, the kids coming up to you?
Yes, they do. They do. And it's amazing. They felt full families come up. We get like the full like cross.
Really?
It's so sweet. It's so sweet to have like the full cross section of generations. But yeah, it's the most important message that we have. And it's it came from also like scars, right? Because I do this speech before Beautiful is Boring, which is about how I think, and I'm not making it up, how I think like scars are beautiful, or, you know, abnormalities or things that make you a bit different. I think it's fucking incredible, those things. If someone's got like some amazing, you know, scar that they got, and the story behind why they got that scar, that's what it's about.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I remember watching an interview recently, and it was about an athlete who he's got a bit of grey hair, he's got some scars, and someone was like, "Rah, you look old," and he was like, "But I've earned these." Yes, you know.
Yeah, that's what it's about. What, we're going to all be like absolute perfect and keep ourselves like pristine. I love aging. I love, you know, I've always wanted to not, you know, I'd love to not have a, you know, like I love it, and I wanted to make a song that just sort of, it's all about scars and like you never forget. It's all the lyrics are about like you'll never forget where you got the scars because they're attached to memories.
Wow.
So you wear those memories on your skin, which I think is a beautiful thought.
I think that's a beautiful way to view things, especially considering we now live in a world where everybody's like trying to, you know, push the narrative to age younger, don't age, get lip fillers, get Botox, you know, have a hair transplant, things like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Because I mean, I don't need to say it out loud because I'm presuming people are sort of getting their head around it. That none of that's going to fix anything, right?
No.
Like, you can get the hair transplant, get your lips done, but if you're not fixing what's going on,
you might end up worse anyway.
You might look worse, and also it's like, and you're not, whatever's going on needs to be addressed. Don't just like make it's not going to go anywhere. So that's just temporary things. Do some work. Start meditating. It's like do the internal work. Don't look at the external.
For sure. What's the story behind Us?
It's about a boy.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's like we do like classic love songs. We had one off the other record which is called, I forgot what it's called, Just Don't Waste My Time With Me. I forgot what it's called. But that was a love song. It's one of my favourite songs of the record. But I don't really do love songs because I don't believe in monogamous relationships, and I don't do that kind of like normal relationship thing. But it's Us is about, and it's happened to me quite a few times. It's about knowing that relationships kind of bloom and then they kind of die, they die. And I think so often, and I've done this, I've been guilty of this so much in my life, you hold on to what the thing was, like the memory of the thing. And you think that's why you're kind of keeping it going, because the memory of it is keeping it alive, not what it actually is.
Right. Not what it's turned into.
Not what it's turned into.
Okay.
So you look back at like, but it was so good, but that was when it was blooming. And it's not that anymore. And that's why you end up in these relationships that like for way longer than you should do.
Yeah.
Because you're like, but the good times are so good. And so often I'm just learning that relationships kind of have that moment in which they're really, it all really makes sense. And then it's okay that they don't anymore, and don't like cling on to that memory. So I wrote a lyric that there was like, I miss what we were so much that I put up with what we are.
Right.
It's like you just sort of tolerate what you are because you miss what you were so much.
Does that, I did wonder if any of these songs were kind of episodic at any point, because it goes from Us into Fix. Is that then like you mending yourself, or is that, what's the story behind that?
Yeah, that is the reason why that was conscious. They weren't written like that, but that's why we put them next to each other. Because I always think with an album, I know there's all the arguments for like people that listen to albums and stuff, but if you are picking an order, let's make it sort of like have a bit of sense as a story. But Fix Me is about, it's exactly that. It's written with Schumann again, and it was about, I wanted to write something about that thing of two people in pain trying to fix each other, and how that's just never going to fly. Like if I'll fix you if you can fix me. And it's sort of that, like, that's never going to fly. Yeah.
And Teeth?
Yeah. It's a fun one.
It definitely is a fun one,
That's about primal. Teeth is a song. It's once again, we set up the parameters and wrote the music around it. But Teeth was, I wanted it to be, because I suffer, it's the overthinking thing, right? You're in your brain a lot. So your instincts go.
Same.
Yeah, right? In your brain all the time. So you're thinking like, I want to like, I'd love to do that. And then you talk yourself out of it. Or like, you kind of like, even with like coming on to someone, you can kind of talk yourself out of it. And and not just that, but with Teeth is kind of about that. It's about having primal instincts for something or someone and kind of second guessing them. And so not going for it. And it's about trying to shed those like second guessing thoughts and going back to like the primal. And that's what Teeth, I want to touch teeth with you. It's stupid, but it's like what animals do. It's like I want to clash teeth. And
then
primal.
And then we go into Blood. Is that almost on the same sort of plane?
Yeah, yes. It's Blood is a song that I wrote like years ago. And I've always loved it. And the lyric is, man, that girl's a disease. She'll get into your blood and she'll never leave. And so it's about like addiction to someone. and like whether that's good or bad. Probably bad.
Probably.
It's a disease.
You know, I think codependency, you know, like you have to be your own person.
It's
right?
it's a big theme for me, and it's a big thing I kind of live my life by. Is like that feeling of like, you know, being dependent on someone. I think is so dangerous.
Right.
I think you need to.
Why is that for you?
Because I think you can lose yourself a bit in that, and I think you've got to be. You can also use it as a crutch to not deal with some issues that you need to deal with yourself. And I think if you know who you are and are okay on your own, then I think the right person will come along. But if you try and sort of hold each other up, when you're not quite okay on the inside, I don't think you're just gonna crutch on each other.
So, because of that, and I know you touched on it before, you don't believe in monogamous relationships. So you kind of feel like you go at your own pace and your own like journeys. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's flowing. It's like it's being aware of when something's done. You know, it's like, or like enjoying something for the time when it's good and not clinging on to it because, you know, you're scared to be on your own or you're scared to hurt someone or you're scared to kind of make that decision.
Did you ever have those fears of like being alone? Or
no, I used to.
Right.
But I realised through a bit of work that all comes from me being a fat kid. It does. It's like, and that's all attached, like being like little fatty that no one wants, you know? So it's like, I have to like...
The reason I'm laughing is because I feel you as a former fat kid myself.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
It's like, you know, like, and that's like, I don't want my decisions to be made because of that, like, little grapply fear of like being liked or being like wanted or desired. And so I have to sort of always check myself and be like, and I'm so good at, I love being on my own now.
Yeah.
I love it.
Being on your own, I think, is a skill, but it's a really important skill.
Really important.
You know, enjoying your own company is so dope sometimes.
I love it. I just renovated a house. So I just renovated a house in Nashville on my own, and it was amazing. Challenging. It's not like it's easy. There's moments where you just want to hug and a cry. Yeah. But like,
life.
You can get life. You can go get a hug and a cry and then come back and crack on. It's just, you know, I think it's so important to really know your own power. I feel more powerful than ever because of it.
And we need to talk about probably my favorite outro track on an album ever, What If I Died.
Yeah.
So good. So good. What was the story behind this one?
It's just like, it's one of my favorite songs again. The slow songs are my favorite songs on this record. It's just, okay, it's all from that moment when you know when you've had a night out and you're lying in bed, right? And you just, you know, in your brain is just going like, and you're lying there and you can't get any peace. And it's just those thoughts that go through your head when that happens about like, you know, what will happen when I go and what, you know, and kind of feeling like life is a bit silly, you know, like all my silly things, what will happen to them. And it's just that kind of...
I think it's a thing that humans probably think about more than they'd like to admit.
Yes.
You know, like I find myself thinking about it all the time.
Agreed.
Like, I don't remember or know what happened before I was here. So the thought of not being here is crazy. It's you can't really comprehend it.
No. And it's about like, I mean, I've always like, it's like about, I've always had this thing about like legacy and what you're leaving behind, right? So I think you have to, if you're going to be an artist, it's some kind of a drive that you sort of have to have. Otherwise you just won't bother, right? It's like, what are you doing it for? Because you want to leave something, you want to leave a footprint that was kind of meant something to someone or to some people. So that kind of thought goes through your mind sometimes. What if it means absolutely nothing and no one even remembers that you were there. And it's like, you know, it's that, just playing with that thought and kind of letting your brain go down that road.
What do you want Bones' legacy to be?
Empowerment.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's empowerment and doing something a bit different. I think thank you for saying what you said, because it is like, it was one of our mission statements was to do something that people hadn't heard before. Right. And I hope that we continue doing that for many years to come.
Wow.
Get weirder and weirder.
So what does the next couple years look like for you guys then?
So we tour this record and we've got to make all the visuals. We're kind of diving into the visual world at the moment. Okay. Which is really, it's my fate. I direct all the music videos and all the stuff. So it goes hand in hand with the music. That's being dived into. Then we put out the record. We're going to be touring, which we haven't done for ages. Got some really exciting tours coming up. Playing Queens of the Stone Age is going to be
amazing.
I know you should come.
Yeah?
It's in Germany. Come, it's Hamburg.
Okay, bet.
Come.
We'll organise
Guest list,
it.
mate.
Yeah?
Done. You should come too. Yes, that's going to be incredible. And then we're touring in the summer. And then I want to get going with the next record as soon as possible. I've got it there. That's the first record was 2019. So I don't want that long of a lapse to happen again. So let's get cracking with the next one.
I could talk to you for ages, honestly. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And we got to do this again soon.
Amazing. Deal.